I'm Luke Story. For the past 22 years, I've been relentlessly committed to my deepest passion, designing the ultimate lifestyle based on the most powerful principles of spirituality, health, psychology, and personal development. The Lifestylist Podcast is a show dedicated to sharing my discoveries and the experts behind them with you. All right, here we go. Second time on the Lifestylist Podcast.
I have long hair now.
You do?
My hair is about the same length.
True.
Yours is the same length.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, just about.
Yeah, last time we recorded, we were out here prospecting.
Mm-hmm.
That would have been around Christmas time 2020.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we were like trying to feel into Austin, and we got to connect with you and a bunch of other great people. And we were like, well, they got the people covered.
Well, we started like putting the tendrils in.
Yeah, exactly.
And then everyone starts to like collaborate together to pull
Right.
in the people we want here.
And then we move here, like about 5 minutes from you guys. We move in our house, and you move away to downtown.
Yeah.
You're like,
We're like, welcome.
bait and switch.
Bait and switch.
Yeah.
Yeah. Welcome. Peace. No, that's good. I want to start out by knowing what's the most exciting thing going on in your individual lives right now, each of you.
Ladies first.
Man, there's so much, that there's a lot that's actually been really confronting for me this last year, because having been in the underground for 14 years, like nobody really knew what I did, right? I was just that person that was like hanging out that everybody knew, but nobody knew why. And so the thing that's been exciting and challenging in that excitement has been now getting like recognized or just like the open conversations around psychedelics. I'm still my nervous system is still getting used to, because everything is starting to change really fast now. When I look at the last 14 years, just the last year and a half, 18 months, everything just ramped up. And so it's been exciting because it's been challenging a lot of my ideas around how things should be in psychedelic space. How you're supposed to train and who's supposed to train you, and all of that has been challenged because the world is changing.
Yeah, it certainly has. That's an interesting observation, thinking about my very recent exploration into this realm maybe 4 years ago or so. And I just I think took it for granted that it's always been this way, but I just wasn't a part of it because I was in sobriety, and it was just, that's those people over there, that's off limits to me. So I don't want to end up under a bridge somewhere. And but yeah, now that you say that, I'm like, oh, it's a whole thing. All right, cool.
Like,
so
this
that's
is in my family signal group with my Mormon parents in Utah. You know what I mean?
Right. Totally. All right. How about you, Tah? What's happening in your life right
the
now?
most exciting, the most profound thing for me right now is I just reached 25 seconds in a handstand at age 50. And that's something that I never perceived possible in the past. And so it's opening me into another space of what else is possible for me and for humanity. And so when I look at myself and I see me in this body, not wearing glasses anymore, feeling younger, looking younger.
We got to talk about the glasses, bro.
Right?
Because as you started talking, not to interrupt, but as you started talking, I was like, fuck, I should have worn my glasses. His face is like double vision blurry.
Like there's so many things that have gotten me into a spot where I see the possibility for myself and I see the possibility for other human beings. And being in the healthcare industry for as long as I've been a nurse for 29 years, and being in a clinical setting for 25 of those 29 years, it was such a distress space where I was looking to fix people. And my objective was to help people stay out of the hospital. And that's what I've been doing. And leaning into this space with us and what we're doing and coaching people around psychedelics I've seen more transformation in the last 10 years of my life than I have in my entire life. And I mean, it's been radical. The shifts are radical. And I was indoctrinated into the wellness, into the healthcare industry, and that drugs are bad and psychedelics are going to make me a crackhead and all of this stuff. And I've seen more positive, expansive transformation in myself and the people that I've supported in psychedelics than in my entire career as a nurse. And this is something that I'm an advocate for. This is something that I'm introducing to nurses, doctors, therapists, all of these people, and getting them into this space where they can start to understand this and actually support ushering this in to the new wellness paradigm. So that's what I'm most excited about
Mhm.
is the
Amen.
handstands and that.
Is the
Amen.
handstands and
Are you talking handstand without a wall
No
behind you?
wall, bro. Middle of the
Damn.
floor.
he's
Middle of the
been working
floor.
on this for like 5
That's
years.
so sick.
2016 was my first time making an attempt at a handstand, and
Wow.
I've been kind of dabbling in it. And this past 4 months, man, I've been on it, and it's just been consistently on it, on it, on it. And as I snap into these different spaces, I'm able to see the nuances in my body in ways that I had never done before.
Wow.
And so I've opened myself up into a space of realization that I've never understood before. And so I see new possibilities for myself, and that creates new realms of possibility for the people that I work with.
Wow. That's amazing. Thank
Thank
you
you.
for sharing that.
Hmm.
Yeah. I remember years ago doing hatha yoga and great teacher. This guy Moss Vidal, actually, he was on the show way early on, and he'd have us do the handstands, but we could, we'd hit the wall. I mean, 5 seconds of that, and I'd
It's
be
true.
dying, and I was way younger than you are. So that's awesome, dude.
Thank you, man.
All right, so I was setting the intention for this conversation that we could both speak to the folks listening who are, dabbling in the realm of plant medicines and psychedelics, those that have some experience and are like, yeah, duh, we've been on this for a while, like you guys have. But I also want to speak to the people that are just kind of hearing whispers of this and going, what is this all about? And I don't know if that's possible, but I just want to state that intention as we get in here because as I was preparing my manuscript, some of the questions were kind of far out and some were, very newbie. And I was like, I got to aim it toward a certain listener. And I thought, you know what, let's try and just make it well rounded.
That works for me.
So I guess we could start out. And this was one of the ones that's kind of for people that maybe are largely unfamiliar with this topic. But how would you define the definition between what we would consider recreational or potentially dangerous drugs versus intentional healing? Power plants, plant medicine, psychedelics, entheogens, and so on. What's the defining characteristic, do you think, so that people can understand?
Well, I mean, it's all intentional. It's just what is the intention,
That's
right?
good. That's good,
So,
yeah.
because, and this is where my perspective has shifted a lot in the last 2 to 3 years, because previously, and the fact that we've trained with a lot of indigenous elders and teachers who come from different traditions, and it's a part of their lifestyle since birth. I had my ideas that if you're doing it in a party setting, then that was bad or wrong. And my mind has shifted in a lot of ways because when I look back at, so I first started to explore psychedelics in 1999, but I was doing it in that party, going to clubs, in that vibe. The rave scene was big back then, right? The thing was, though, had it not been for substances back then, I would not have healed from some of the traumas that had happened in my teens because those were the only people I could relate to and talk to. And so, I ended up in a coma at 17 from GHB. It was a contaminated batch, a bad batch of GHB. There was 9 of us that ended up in the hospital. And so that's when I realized I couldn't hang out in that scene safely because I thought I was smart. I was told GHB is not dangerous if you know what you're doing. We got a contaminated batch we didn't know, right? And so what I recognized then was that I couldn't be in the crowd in the scene that I was and that that wasn't the path. But in retrospect, had I not had that exploration back then, um, I'm not sure what would have happened because I didn't have the support that I needed with some of the traumas that had happened, and finding other people that had been through that is what kept me alive longer. And so, whether it was cigarettes or alcohol or substances, when I really strip back or like kind of pull myself back and remove any of the judgments, then I actually find that it always comes down to intention. And sometimes that intention is partying. I think the difference is when someone realizes that they're buffering or avoiding feelings, that that path is going to hit a dead end. And so when you intentionally shift it towards what do I need to know, do, be, or understand about myself, my environment, my choices, then that type of intention starts to get you somewhere. So for me, the only difference is one tends to lead to a wall that you'll do something about or not. And the other one becomes an infinite path. And so it just determines what intention do you
I
want to go
love
towards.
that. I love that. It's a very non-dual way to look at it because I think as someone coming out of a history of very destructive drug use to myself and anyone that happened to be in my orbit, I tend to classify, and it's not a judgmental thing against people who, like to do blow or whatever they're doing. It's just, I think, well, those are bad because they were bad for me.
Sure.
And then this other realm that we're going to be speaking about is good. It's kind of this binary a way to look at it. But I love that. That's a really great way to
I
put
mean,
that.
we're seeing as much addiction in the shamanic spaces. There's merely less judgment on it. And what I mean by that is people can get enough significance and desire to connect to the oneness. But then when they come back to 3D and don't actualize as any of the changes to bring heaven on earth, then they have to journey again,
Yeah,
which can be just as dysfunctional and cause them to not pay bills and go into a deep depression because they realize where they aren't, but they're
yeah,
not taking the steps.
yeah.
It just doesn't come with the same judgments as someone with a needle in an alley, but we are seeing as much dysfunction in journey spaces too.
For me, what comes into play to make the difference in those spaces is information in the form of context, judgment, and indoctrination. And so the context that a person uses a substance in has a lot to do with how they're educated and informed on it, and how they're judged on it, and how we judge the substance or the substance use in an indoctrinated space puts us into a place to determine if something is good or bad. Now, when you look at this country, right? Partying, having a great time, people getting together, cooking out at a picnic, right? It's a great thing. It's fun, right? Except, is it a good thing when you're hanging somebody from a tree and you're having a picnic to celebrate that? Right. And so where's the judgment? Where's the context? Where's the indoctrination? And
He's all,
right.
wow, that went
Okay.
sideways
Okay.
quick.
Well, we're going deep.
Yeah, no, I
Okay,
mean, if we're
let's do
if
it.
we're gonna go there, then
Yeah.
let's go
Let's
there.
do it.
And so when you look at substances, I have a very close friend who is who utilizes cocaine to journey with. And this person, he's very intentional, sets up his house, has incense burning, music playing, very intentional with it, and he's very dose specific with it, and he goes in, and this is how he expands. And he comes back from his realms with all of this stuff, and it's an occasional circumstance. It's not a situation that happens all the time. And so this person is informed, he's educated, experienced in this space. It doesn't disrupt his entire life. And when I told me, I was like, man, what are you doing? I was a nurse, right? Oh, all this judgment space. And it took me getting into the space of understanding outside of my context with psychedelics to start to understand that he wasn't just messing around. He was really going into a space of learning about himself using that substance. That's something that was foreign to me. And so in learning about this, I got to remove my judgment, I got to remove my indoctrination, and I got to change my context around that space with the information that I now had. And so the judgment space that we put ourselves in around recreation in our world is it's a good thing until it's not. And if you have too much recreation, it's a bad thing. If you feel too good, it's a bad thing. And so we damn a lot of things where people are looking to feel good, and we damn the things that would remove people from feeling horrible about themselves or depressed, which could be substances that would put people into these spaces. So my invitation for folks is to look into the information space in the form of context, judgment, and indoctrination. Those are the three factors for me that would lean into seeing a difference, a bifurcation in that space.
So you reminded me. You guys know Carl Hart, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Dr. Carl Hart.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Drug use for grown-ups.
Yeah. What's his book called?
Drug use for
Yeah,
grown-ups.
yeah.
grown-ups.
Amazing book. That
It is.
that freaking book blew my mind because I mean a lot of it, and hopefully, do you guys know him personally?
We met him.
No,
Oh,
yeah.
okay, yeah. Because I
Mhm.
tried to get him on an interview, and I never heard back. So I'm going to try again. If anyone knows him, shout out to Dr. Carl Hart. But in that book, amongst many of the mind blowing paradigms that he just exploded, was talking about how he uses heroin recreationally. And no judgment, but as a former heroin addict, like
You're like, what?
my recreational period was probably about 3 weeks, and then it was like 5 years of
Yeah.
the real deal. And I think a lot of that is circumstantial and depending on your trauma and your genes, probably even. But one thing I really liked from his perspective was, and this is kind of a little bit of what you're touching on, maybe, is the preconceived ideas we have around drugs, and a lot of that has been imposed upon us, right? Where when cannabis started, bleeding into Western culture, it was like, oh, those dirty Mexicans, it's their drug, right? And it's like a dangerous drug, reefer madness and all this stuff. But there was like a racial component to it.
Yep.
And then also with heroin, it's like the black jazz musicians are using it, and then they're like, aha, now we can pin it on them.
Mhm.
It's
Even though
like,
it's predominantly white people doing it.
yeah. But it's like, I love how he explored the systemic kind of the brainwashing around it,
Mhm.
around prohibition,
Well,
I mean, and that's even if you look at something like sexuality, if you come from a deeply indoctrinated religious culture, the shame alone of a sexual experience, like when we look at it through a trauma lens, because from a facilitation perspective, when we're doing an intake process, we're not just taking in their current medical, what medications they may be taking. We're looking at their cultural considerations, the environment of their childhood. Are they first generation American? Were their parents immigrants? Like, what were they the immigrant? There's so many factors there, gender dynamics, sex, that play into all the habits that create this organism and how it functions. And so deep shame becomes a construct that works through someone's system to self-oppress and repress and oppress. And so even looking at something where if someone thinks heroin is bad and they've now crossed that line, their thought about the action can create the feeling that takes them over the edge that's pushing that shame dynamic. So if none of that existed, the judgment on a substance, and we only looked at the results, if we only said, okay, so this person does heroin just, every single day, but they've done this company that contributes $10 billion to end sex slave trafficking, would we see that as a problem? And so for us, that's our biggest thing is when we do what we can from a coaching perspective to literally just look at the results. Is someone getting what they want? And if or where they're looking to grow, and if they're going off track, how far? And then it's asking them, are you okay with the results? I love smoking cigarettes, like point blank period, love. And
Oh man.
the thing is, there is a point that it's detrimental to my organism, right?
Yeah.
And so the thing is, now if I smoke a cigarette, I'm so present to it. I'm in full
it's
gratitude.
it's interesting to watch.
Yeah. And
You're able to do that?
yeah, and
You're one
like
of
I'll go through a 3-week smoking period and just stop.
Oh my
It
god.
just fades out because there is an intention that for me, remember, tobacco is a master plant also. It's for grounding. And even me in a smoking phase might be 2 in a day. So it's not suddenly going to a pack I'm throwing back, right? And my intention is always like to get a really good quality tobacco. And sometimes I'm just ratchet and do what I want, which is cool too. But
Getting
when
some
I
cool menthols at the 7-Eleven.
Ooh, okay, no, she has
Some
standards.
Newports.
No, she does have standards. But it's when I look at the results and when you learn radical self-acceptance and honesty, then you go, okay, so here's where I want to be. And let's say I have physical fitness goals. If this is impacting my lung capacity, which is more important to me right now? Sometimes the grounding of tobacco, if I'm in a rough mental place, is more important in the moment. And other times, staying uncomfortable is more important to get to the goal. And so this is where developing systems of radical honesty, which is like the coaching methods that is like the groundwork for what we do, is that you get to choose this is your life. But if you'll remove the stigmas or at least be aware of them, but truly look at the data, what is the outcome? What's your physical health? Are you enjoying your life? What direction are you going? Then what difference does it make? And when I reached that level of self acceptance for myself, that's why I could go a year, 2 years, not have a single puff of a cigarette, and then go 3 weeks straight. But I know my body so well now that I could hold food in my hand. And if my body's like, I won't eat it, I could have a full plate of food I've had 1,000 times. That took time and really like intimately getting to know my body and knowing my body's cues and really trusting that no one's the expert of me. Most of the medical conditions I had, surgeries, when something didn't go right, I was the one that figured it out afterwards because I have studied this system and I know it.
Yeah, I like the piece of looking at the results, right? By their fruits you shall know them kind of thing. And this was
Mm.
a huge hurdle for me when I was 22 years sober, living my best life, growing, changing, but still stuck in some places. And when I made the leap, I got such incredible results and expansion and healing. that I continued on, with I think a pretty decent degree of caution and discernment. But after about 3 years of that, I got a call from my dad. He's like, "Hey, can we talk?" And he says, actually, no, I had the first call from a mentor I used to have in recovery. Same call, two different people. Both of them went a little something like this. Hey, man, like, what's going on with you and like these psychedelics and stuff? Are you cool? And I knew that I was cool, but I had to kind of explain to them to, alleviate some of their worry and or concerns. And the thing that came to me was, okay, let me just look at all the metrics of my life in every conceivable way, in every category of my life, my internal, mental, emotional, spiritual life, my sexuality, my finances, everything outward, career, relationship, every single thing, if you had a chart, was like a fucking hockey stick of just
Mhm.
doing great, you know? And if I was using addictively, like the way I was with the intention I had, which is just, slowly or maybe quickly kill myself, that would be an upside down hockey stick where I would lose everything in a matter of weeks or months. My entire life would be burned to the ground because I did it many times. I know what that looks like. So I love that. You were going to add something to that, Tom?
Yeah, I have something that I can add to it.
Yeah.
When I look at the lens of substances and addiction and usage and these types of things, as a nurse, I took care of a lot of people that dove into substances, and most of them were not addicted. And there are three levels that I see people using substances: crutching, coping, and survival. Right? There are people who would crutch on substances. Every once in a while, they need to take the edge off of life. Then there were people who used substances to cope with what was going on. And then there were people who were the people who I saw that were addicted were doing it for survival. In survival, that they wouldn't kill themselves, or that, it was barely keeping them alive.
Mhm.
Very familiar.
Right? Okay.
with
So
the third
okay,
option.
okay, and so these are the three spaces that I've seen people in, and the crutching was usually the recreational people, the people who were doing it for recreational purposes. The coping were the people who were looking to keep their families together or glue themselves to a circumstance or stay in their job or whatever. And then the survival people, those are the people who were, this is the only way that I can feel good enough at some point to give myself a reason to be alive
Mhm.
on this planet. And so I worked at like 13 hospitals in New York City. Okay, because I wanted to see the different socioeconomic backgrounds, the different racial, cultural, ethnic situations, and it was the same thing for everybody. There was crutching, coping, and survival. No matter who was using substances, it was in those three spaces, and that's what I saw. And so this also was one of the reasons why I was like, I see this so clearly. How come nobody else sees this? I wanted to get out of nursing because the system was still fortifying people staying in the same loops. Our mental health system was not helping people to see themselves and be full in themselves. It was helping them to be repeat customers. And so this was problematic. This was an issue because the drug war, it was very few people, and that was being broadcasted and accentuated by our media, and the majority of people that were using substances weren't in an addictive space. And so this caused me a lot of confusion in myself, which caused me to want to get out of the healthcare industry because I saw a lot of lying going on. And so I just wanted to bring that into the conversation because these are the spaces around all drugs are bad. It's not the drugs that are bad, it's the drugs that are being used for these reasons. Are we aware that they're being used for these reasons? And the people that are using these substances need our help more than anybody. And we're damning them, we're punishing them, we're sending them to jail, we're sending them to rehab places, we're not hiring them, we're doing all of these things instead of offering them the support that would really help them integrate their lives. And their lives are disintegrated. And that's why integration is so important to me.
And it's in the I love that Ta's just saying that about integration because people go into these power plant master mycelium experiences, they are disintegrated. They come out of it, go back to work on Monday, and then journeying becomes another way to buffer or to just let some air out just enough to continue forward. And for me, when I got really honest with myself, at first I took suicide off the table. So when I made that decision that I wouldn't take my own life intentionally in that way, that was like phase one. Phase two was realizing I had only changed the speed of my suicide. I had only decided not to do it quickly. And the thing that was more insidious in this, in my own healing journey, was I was slowly killing myself with what I ate, fast food, drinking like the cheapest Magnum bottles of wine, like Boone's Farm style from like the
Oh,
gas
yeah.
station,
Oh my
Ambien to
god.
sleep, energy drinks to wake up. And that was killing me more than any other substance was.
Mm.
But socially, that was acceptable. And if we really just removed the stigma from any substances and looked at how someone's life was operating, like how is it functioning for them? If you took away Netflix, cell phones, people that are busy and always creating is also an adaptation. You can have two kids from the same family where one becomes an addict and the other becomes a successful CEO, but they're hypervigilance of a CEO could be causing trauma in their children because of the compliance they force, or they end up having a health crash because they're suppressing emotion. And we've seen this more times than I can count. And so if we only looked at the results, and then at different ages, are we happy with the results? Then that's when my life started to actually improve, was the radical honesty in all ways, not in the ways that I was told was bad, but actually looking at how's my body functioning? How's my life functioning? How's everything going? I feel great about it. Perfect.
Yeah, amen. You just reminded me of something when you're talking about the cheap wine. Oh my god, drinking 40 ounces of malt liquor, man.
Yummy.
$2. They're like $2.
Totally.
And then if we only had $2, we would water it down. I just remembered this, and me and my homie Ronnie, shout out to Ronnie, probably never heard my podcast before. We'd say, let's make some Budweiser. So we'd take King Cobra and we just add
Oh.
water. I mean, King
Ugh.
Cobra is
Oh,
disgusting
totally.
in and of itself. But man, when you
Ugh.
add some water, you do not have a Budweiser, by the way, to our friends listening.
King Cobra, Colt 45,
yeah.
Old English
Oh, yeah.
800. Ugh.
Getting it done. Getting it done quick. So I don't want to spend too much time on this because
Yeah.
I really want to get into the coaching, facilitation, all of the stuff
Mhm.
that you guys are into now, and you have
Yeah.
incredible offerings, and so I want to get into that. But I'm curious because I don't think I've ever asked either of you this. What was the kind of moment or the deciding factor when you went from a participant in ceremony and started experiencing positive results and healing to your first journey you're leading for someone? Because you guys have facilitated Allison and I in a legal
Yeah.
location, and you're very skilled at it. I mean,
Thank
we
you.
felt
Thank you.
incredibly safe and held, and it was a really beautiful experience. But I don't think I ever got the origin story of like, when did you break off and go, wow, I want to do this. I'm going to learn and start doing it.
I think that that's a common, or I see a lot of people come into this work with this idea that there's just this moment and then you step into it and you're now a facilitator.
Right.
First of all, if you're doing that, let's talk. You definitely need to come to one of our trainings. The thing was, when you first get the call, it's like when someone decides they want to become a doctor. So you do pre-med, and then you go to medical school, and then you do residency. Like there is a process before you actually are on your own doing surgery, right? And then you still have a team or whatever. And so it was an evolutionary process, one that we were more resistant than accepting of. And it really wasn't until enough people came to us, because we kept putting together groups for facilitators. And it wasn't until enough people were like, I don't want to sit with them. Like, when are y'all going to do it? Because first I spent 6 years on my own healing journey. I had a lot of medical conditions. There's lots of podcasts on it as far as my healing journey. But I spent 6 years, I needed to figure, so I had a lot to sort in my physical health. And so by the time Tah and I started doing the work together, I had been 6 years in myself. And then he's got 11 years on me. So he was already doing forms of work that wasn't psychedelics, right? And so when we started going to journeys together, we would sit and facilitate people because of our experience, but we were not the facilitator. We were integrators. And so we started getting invited just to come be of service and hold space. And then that started to be where we started to be more involved over time. And
Yeah.
so there wasn't a moment. I don't even remember our first time like facilitating officially or something. Do you?
Oh, I do.
I bet you do. You remember everything.
Oh yeah, I do. And it was like she was saying, it's a process.
Mhm.
And it was one thing after the next, and people were asking us,
For a
please,
long
please,
time.
please.
Yeah.
And the thing is, we have this way of accepting people, radical acceptance of all people, where we were getting our love is really, really big, and we do a lot of kissing and hugging and making out. And we were told at Journeys that we couldn't kiss anymore, that our love was triggering people. And so we started to see other people not being accepted in journey spaces. And so it gave us more of a kind of like a push to lean
Your
into
joy is too much for this trauma container.
and and so it gave us kind of a push into a space where people were like, please, I see how free y'all are. I want to be in that free energy. Do you think you can do that? And so we ended up leaning into that space.
Mhm.
It was an honor for people to ask us to be in that space. It was also frightening because I was like, I'm not a facilitator. I'm
Yeah,
not a
who am
facilitator.
I?
Who
I
am I?
haven't trained enough.
And this is where we started.
You know, part of what really shifted, and this is where a lot of our perspective shifted as well, is in this last year and a half, there's been an awakening, unlike I have seen in the last 14 years, of people that feel like they are so certain they're called to be facilitators or in this work in some way. And I truly believe that through these master teachers, many people's ancestral traditions are being awakened for the next evolution of elders for our, because this culture doesn't have elders. And so many people's has been stripped away that it feels to me like an awakening. And this is not just here in the States. Our teachers from South America and beyond, like to Arctic Siberia, are seeing similar things, more shaman being born. And so what we've also seen is that, okay, more people are getting the call. That's what caused us to fully step out and start to educate, because I also believe that everyone can support someone. You just need to get clear in what you know, what you don't, what your skill sets are, what they are not. Because just like CPR, if I was out and I was the only person there, even though I've only taken like 2 4-hour classes, I would do the best I could if I was the only person there. I'm the best person for the job. And we have lots of communities in the States that don't have professional support, that don't have a shaman or an indigenous elder. And so there will be people that feel safest with someone that looks like them, someone with a similar lived experience. And that level of safety, if someone feels safe to explore themselves, is quite often all they need is a safe container for step one. And so that's when we really decided that's what we wanted to empower, was that for the leaders of each community to come forward so that we could give them frameworks so that they could see, are we in alignment with what we want? Are we educated? Because without education, people can't choose how they're participating in these things.
Wow, that's awesome. I love the way that you're approaching that, you guys. It's very cool.
Thank you.
And I think part of that question is for myself too, and I'm sure many people share this. But when you have such a profound experience within yourself, and you break through, lifelong patterns, and you have these ecstatic experiences with the divine and all of the things that are potentially happening in a ceremony, it's quite common that I come out of it and I'm like, I need to do this. This is my calling, and then a couple days go by and I'm like, well, I'm kind of doing my podcast thing, you
I'll
know.
stick with the podcast for
But
now.
and especially that is especially prevalent anytime I've sat with Bufa, with the toad. I mean, and even saying it now, I'm like, you're probably right. But after those, I'm always like, literally nothing else matters. Like, I have to do this. Then I go back to life, and then it's like, oh well, what about that? Well, I'd have to go train under someone, and the logistics of it, and feeling like qualified, I think, is something that I'm honest with myself about,
Sure.
that those situations could be potentially dangerous in a number of ways, especially with that, you know.
Well,
Um,
but this is the thing, is like we don't actually ascribe to that. It's through proper intake, there should be zero harm with all substances. Doesn't mean it's impossible, but the medicalization models that are being rolled out, they're actually including harm. So for them, if they're saying we're having an efficacy of 80% of people, rock on, that's better than any other antidepressant or medication that's available on the market. So you, as Luke just had this incredible experience, statistically, you're still probably fine if it's people that know and trust you. And this is not to condone any illegal behavior by anyone, merely to say that when we work with elders, the harm is zero, because they know the proper intake process to understand if this is the right direction for someone. And so by clearly educating people in what they need to know, do, be, or understand from the intake process, you would already know if this is something each individual person is comfortable with. Because for us, it's not rocket science, actually. Now that we tracked it for such a long time, it's quite clear in our data what the potentials are. Now, I don't know what's going to happen in someone's experience, but because of their life, because of how their parents are, have been, or how they're physically manifesting illness and disease right now, we can pretty much guess what's going to be on the other side of their experience out of two possibilities, which helps to educate and inform the person and create a what we call what happens when. So if you get if you get this outcome, what do we do? If you get this outcome, what do we do? And then people are there to choose, and it's a collaboration versus a diagnosis or a treatment. So
I
it's a
love it.
completely different approach.
Yeah, I
It's an
like that.
it's an integrated approach.
Hmm.
And the way we see integration, the whole process is integration. The psychedelic experience is a part of a process of integration. From when you first start considering that you want to make a shift in your existence, you're integrating a potential. And then when you lean into having an intention, you're creating an intention, you're integrating that intention. When you bring in a facilitator or a shaman or a therapist, you express your intention with them. They do an intake on you. You do an intake on yourself. You bring the information together. That information becomes integrated. The person supporting becomes informed. And so, if anything should come up in the experience or after the experience, we know how to navigate. When we ask you, okay, if this happens, what would you like us to do? How would you like to be supported? It gives us a safety net. It gives the person an idea that they will be safe. So the psychedelics don't have to go in and pound their way in. They go in gently and they kind of stir the pot and bring things to the surface to be explored. When the person is in a psychedelic experience, since we've gone through their life situation, their not just their mindset, but their body set, their social set, the setting of their constructs, be that their race, gender, identity, nationality, so forth, all of these things they're in their social set, we know what this person is navigating. So it's not a surprise to us if anything should come up. We know how to redirect a person back to their intention. And then afterwards, we help them to integrate that and mesh that with their life, with their job, with their family, with whatever it is as a new person that's coming back with all this new information. And
Yeah.
so the whole process of what we're looking at is integration.
That's awesome. Because rather than looking at an experience like this as you're living your life, you're on a flat plane, and then you go into a ceremony or therapy session and fireworks go off, and then you just like that was the thing. But what you're saying is the whole process is the thing,
Mhm.
Hmm.
and that those fireworks in the middle of the story are merely just part of the landscape of a more broad
Exactly.
process. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so you just remodeled a house. So this will make sense for you. What a lot of people want is they're uncomfortable with some part of their life. So they seek out a facilitator and they're like, let's just do harder, faster, more now. Or I'm going to go to the jungle and do 10 ayahuasca ceremonies in 14 days. I'm going to get to the other side of my trauma and then I'll be able to come back and everything's going to be better. We have to look at, like Tah was saying, the body set. If they've got adrenal system, just like they're totally fatigued, if they're having strange allergies or strange skin things, just signs that the body's already in a lot of distress. Going into something like ayahuasca could actually make things worse because their body's depleted. The body will reach a point, it will completely shut down. And so, just like remodeling a house, what we teach from a coaching method, because again, we're not teaching facilitation, we're helping in education and integration as an entire process. What we can educate someone is someone may come to me with that example and say, all right, so, in remodeling my internal landscape, I want to take this load bearing wall of trauma because I think that if I just rip the root out on this deep wound, then I'll be free. We call it like psychitecture. We're looking at the inner architecture and load bearing walls. And so, because of our assessment process, I could go, hey, Luke, I know that you want to take this wall out and get an open concept, and you'll feel like there will be more space in your system. But that adaptation is also giving you the ability to work. And if you lose that ability to work and you can't support your children, your family, pay for your bills, I'm concerned in that could then slide into a depressive state because you can't pay for the wellness checkups and things you need to be supported in your life. And so what that means is, where can we create support systems that if someone's going to do that work, beautiful, but we want to make sure that there is an infrastructure to support something big like that being compromised or taken out, because if it's a load bearing part of someone's existence, the whole thing can come collapsing in. And then it's 2 years if you have the resources for support.
I've seen it happen. Have either of you I mean, that thing of, too much, too fast, not thoughtful, you're gone for months
Yep.
or and one of my friends, he was out for about a year,
Yep.
just too
Too
enthusiastic.
much, too
Yeah,
fast. It's
yeah.
that creates trauma too in the system.
Have either of you ever had any negative experiences with facilitators who were ill-equipped to handle the grid, the space?
In an experience that we were
Yeah,
having,
that you were having as a participant.
I have not.
No, I had people I didn't resonate with that were not space holders for me. And this is why someone may come highly recommended to you and be great for everyone, but they're not for you. And so I had a facilitator that I started laughing when they were trying to do like a very serious meditation. But the more they tried to like repress me for that, then it became that like when you're trying to not laugh thing. And so then I got up because they asked me to leave the space if I couldn't. Their idea of reverence varies. And people's ideas and projections come into facilitation too. And I was raised in a religion where you cross your arms and bow your head to be reverent, right? And so now I'm not being reverent for this experience. And so they asked me to leave. But I'm like, I'm not going off by myself right now. I'm getting ready to drop in. So I grabbed Tah's hand and I'm like, oh, you're coming with me because I'm not like going off by myself. And the more I'm trying not to laugh, it's turning into that like, out of the nose, like, and it's just getting louder. And the building we were in was like stone and travertine. So it's just echoing off everything. And I don't even know where I'm running Tah to because I'm just trying to get away from the space before I just completely explode in laughter, which was apparently super offensive. And we sat and laughed like full belly for 3 or 4 hours. And it was the first time in my life I realized that I was done purging through suffering and that laughter was now the way that I could heal and move forward, and that those kind of containers had had their time for me to be intentional as far as head bow, alone, be quiet. It was like, no, now is the time to be big. And that's when that really informed how we hold containers where we say everything is welcome. And so, because we know how to set the context, we know how to talk through what that could look like. No one's allowed to just do anything in a moment. You come talk to me if you need something, because we recognize there wasn't space for big energies. You were supposed to lay on your mat, be quiet, be still. And we are like, now is not the time to be quiet or be still.
Yeah. Bringing it back to remembering that weekend, I'm going to change my answer to that
Okay.
because it was the same
Oh,
facilitation
true.
space that the next day I was having a conversation with somebody that came to me and asked me to help them navigate something. I was helping them navigate that. The facilitator was upset that I was supporting this person and they weren't, and came and told me that I was being too much. And so I have a very interesting talent of being able to pull myself out of an altered
No
space,
matter how much
no
it
matter
took.
how much.
Mhm.
And so I said, okay. And I pulled myself completely out of it. And I went and I sat in a room by myself and I just contemplated what was going on and what I never wanted to be a part of again. So I do want to change that. That
Mhm.
was the one time that I
Mhm.
had that. And that I think that was the snap move, the snap time that actually
To
got me
step
into a
forward.
space to step
Yeah.
forward. So
Yeah.
so
Because
yeah,
there
so bringing
wasn't
it back around.
Yeah,
Mhm.
there really wasn't a place for us. And I think that was a big part in us moving to Austin. In a lot of the people we've ended up working with over the years was that it's people with big missions and purpose whose energies require more space actually. And so that made perfect sense to us where we were like, right, where can people go be big, yell, scream? Because for us, like even psychosis or anything doesn't concern us. We don't have that concern even if it's in someone's history. We have different questions. We have different things to talk through. We've worked with people with identity disorders, manic bipolar, on medications, if they had community support, a therapist, clear systems in their life, and as far as their own functioning, super functioning. Like they had a support system. And then there was a plan, and we talked to the therapist. Like everyone was informed of this action, right? And so for us, there's an incredible YouTube video by Kitty Sipple, and it's called, if you look, The Gates of Madness. they literally share, as someone with multiple disorders that's not supposed to do psychedelics, that people with a lot of these conditions live in madness. So they have an easier time navigating
Oh,
psychedelics as
wow.
a result, given they have the right support system and they live in a safe environment. Because where we see truly that the when people end up coming to us after like a psychosis, psychedelics or not, we have, we coach people for lots of reasons. And psychosis is a transformational experience. No matter what brings them to us, usually the psychosis happens in an environment where there was tremendous trauma. So it's usually back around family is the time we see it the most often.
Yeah. Well, it's funny that you guys developed this style of facilitation, and I want to get into after this kind of delineating what you guys teach and facilitating. It's getting a little
Totally.
mushed up, but back to like you as former facilitators, or I don't know what you're doing now, but luckily we got in when you
Once a
when you
year in
were.
Costa Rica
Yeah, there you go.
or Peru.
But when Alice and I sat with you 2 and had a beautiful experience with Wachuma, otherwise known as San Pedro for those listening who are unfamiliar with that word, there was a lot of intake, long phone call, you knew a lot about us, where we were in our lives, our experience with, prior medicine, all the things. But what I thought was really cool about it was that it was just you're on your own, do your own thing, and also knowing that you 2 are right there if we needed anything at all,
Yep.
whether it's a banana or a shoulder to cry on or whatever, right? And I just had my own experience, and I'd run into Allison, and she'd just be off laughing and, looking at the clouds, and we'd kinda hug, "Oh, bye," and then I'm off to the pool, sitting in the waterfall and just doing my thing, so it was a really it was very safe, but I think that safety was also put in place by the fact that you knew a lot about us, and I knew that. So if anything comes up, I know that I can go to either of you, and you're going to help me work through it. And turns out I didn't really need any help that day. But then at the end of the night, all 4 of us came together, and then we started doing some work,
Mhm.
which was pretty new to me at that point. I'm kind of like solo-mish journey guy, like I'm talking to people is usually not in my repertoire. And we worked through some really, I mean, it wasn't that sticky, but it was like stuff that would have had a different flavor in just in normal waking state conversation, and we had a really beautiful time. But that's only because we felt like talking to you about it, and we were in that space, and if we hadn't, I felt like you would have just said, "Okay, go do your thing." So it's a perfect blend, I guess, is what I'm
Thank
saying, of
you.
Yeah.
being there for someone, but also knowing how much you're needed and
Well,
being cool with
Well,
that.
to be honest, the difference is when you as a facilitator don't have an outcome. Like, I didn't need you to get anywhere. And so the problems that we see is when facilitators want people to have transformation so much it becomes about the facilitator, not the people. We don't need you to be different than you ever are, right? If we have gifts and tools to help someone illuminate within themselves, for sure. Do we have skills? 100%. Don't need to prove it though, right? And so to be able to relax and sit back, our invitation is always for people to explore and use their own tools first, right? That's what got them to where they are. They're beautiful. We want to integrate those. It's that we don't have an outcome. If you talk to us, don't talk to us, like it doesn't matter.
there's no attachment to outcome.
Mhm.
It's not about me. And this is one of the things that we teach people is how to hold space. I am holding the space for you to have an experience. You show me and tell me what your intention is, and I support the container that supports that. And if you are outside of that space, I can ask you, do you remember what your intention was? Are you still interested in that intention? Cool. Would you like some support in being swung back to that so I can remind you what that is? And that's it. And so this is the supporting of your experience. Your tears, if you get sad and all of that stuff,
Raging,
raging,
screaming,
screaming,
breaking stuff.
it's not my experience. I'm here to support you and make sure that you are in a space where your body is safe, your mind is safe, and all of these things are and you're keeping yourself safe. I'm not making you safe. I'm providing you the environment and the stimulus for you to be safe in your expansion and exploration of self. There are facilitators that want people to have transformations, that want people to see God, that want people to be better because they see them as broken, which is an undertone of shame.
Mhm.
And this is something that we teach people to stay out of, especially if a person is going to be facilitating. That is an important part of the integration process to let a person have their experience. You can support somebody without altering their experience because you feel uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a what I sensed, and I've sensed this with, many facilitators holding space is just, a sense of safety. Just knowing that if it's kind of like, living near the police station, like, don't really need them, but if you do, you're glad they're, 5 minutes away, which I currently am, I found out. We blew a propane line. I was like, "Are those guys living in the backyard?" They were here in, like, 30 seconds.
Wow.
But it's a sense of security just knowing that there's someone there that can handle shit if it gets wonky,
Yeah,
Yeah.
and almost in that knowing, things don't get wonky because
exactly.
you have the wherewithal within your own soul to work it out as you go, and it gets, it
It's when
gets
people panic that it goes sideways, when they feel like someone doesn't have them.
yeah,
Then that is when their nervous system kicks in. They can't think clearly. The more at ease someone is, the deeper they can go into their experience because the first step is the physical body has to feel safe to allow the conscious mind or the consciousness to travel space and time and whatever. If the physical body is not safe, it's going to impact the experience
yeah.
for sure. And the more relaxed you are, if something challenging comes up, you're like, and I can just breathe.
It's bringing me back to, you mentioned the year that you started working with psychedelics, and I was like, "What year was it for me?" It was 1987. Home ec class in high school was my first acid trip. It came on, and that was 10 years of pretty horrible psychedelic experiences that I just kept going back to over and over again because it was the exact opposite of what we're describing here.
Right.
It's like totally unsafe environments, total, chaos many times. And also everything was very random, not only no intention, but just we don't know where we're going, who's going to be there. I mean, talk about no set and setting. I mean, like the worst possible scenarios you can
It's all the
imagine.
sets and settings.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, oh God. It's like, for those that have had those type of experiences, it's beautiful to kind of illustrate what it can be if it's done thoughtfully.
Yeah.
That brings me into what I was alluding to earlier. So you guys have the Condor Approach. You
Mhm.
have this training program, which my friend David Keller has been raving about. Oh my God, Tah and Kole, their program. Ah. And I'm so glad he found you because he's very,
Yeah.
enthusiastic and not new to psychedelics, but new to using them in this capacity.
Coaching is a different thing, and this
Yeah,
is
so
the
give me the breakdown of because you guys aren't teaching people how to go serve medicine to
uh-uh.
people. You're doing something else. So let me get clarity on that for people listening.
Yeah, so, we break things down in I'll actually turn it over to you because the way you break down just kind of the different roles between Sherpa, facilitator, because I think that that will give great context to guide us into this conversation.
Sure. So there are different levels. So the way we break things down, and this is all context driven. There's a person who's a trip sitter, and a trip sitter is kind of like a foundational person who can hold space for a person that's having an experience. They may not have experience facilitating and guiding people through, but they know how to keep an environment safe. They know how to walk somebody to the bathroom. They know how to set up a room. That's a trip sitter. A space holder is a person that's like a trip sitter plus. The trip sitter, and they can actually hold space for a person and maybe guide a person back to their intention. They maybe know how to see where a person may be going and swing them back around. A facilitator is a person who's skilled at space holding, trip sitting, and plus, right? And so they can actually help guide a person into really, really deep spaces because they know how to navigate psychedelic spaces themselves really well. They've been adept at it. They've been in the psychedelic space. In particular, hopefully they're utilizing, they're guiding a person with a substance that they know how to navigate. So that's a facilitator. A Sherpa is a person who can go into the space like shaman, right? Who are doing ayahuasca. They'll take ayahuasca and they'll be in the field with a person. And so a Sherpa goes in and they are actually altered because they're so good at navigating psychedelics. They know how to hold that space in that container and be in it. There's a different vibrational quality to it where they can actually guide a person, feel a person's situation and be in there with them. It's like taking somebody into the mountains. You're a Sherpa. And so those are the different spaces. An integration coach is a person who actually can coach a person from the beginning of the process through the entire process and then after the process process to integrate everything into their lives. So this is a kind of like an overseer. And we always invite people who are space holders, who are facilitators, who are Sherpas to be able to coach integration because you're part of an integration process. And this is something that we've been finding has been a challenge for people is because people are not guiding people into integration. You have this experience, you have a circle at the end of the journey, and then you go do whatever you do, right? And then people are coming to me and Cole because it's like, I don't know what to do. My
Mhm.
life's falling apart. You will integrate things whether you realize it or not. Are you the person that's influencing your integration? Are you the person that knows how to drive the bus? Are you the captain of the ship, or is the ship driving you into out to sea on your own? And so those are the differences in those spaces. And what we teach is how people can do an intake process. Which, if you're going to be guiding people through journeys as a facilitator, if you don't have an intake process, you're asking for it.
Well, and it's gonna cost you time and money,
Hmm.
for sure. And that's, what we realized is, one, we actually don't need more facilitators. Beyond the fact that it's not legal
In most places.
in most places. There's a few key things people don't understand. One, it's like everyone wants to be the facilitator. It's like the Steven Tyler, you know what I mean? They're like, no, if I'm going to be an Aerosmith, I want to be Steven Tyler.
Oh
And
man.
so we get that. We understand there's a lot of significance. That's wonderful. Part
Oh,
of it
the
is
responsibility though, man, if you really understand the gravity of
when you
that,
really
I
well
mean,
when you really get clear in your true intention, if it's to help people, then the current model to help people is what we call a psychedelic informed coach. You are the engineer that's looking at all the information, where someone's giving you their big vision, and you're going to help them architect that and coach them through that model. But it's all their idea. They come with the design. They say, look, I'm going to go do ayahuasca. I'm going to go sit with ayahuasca in Peru. After this, when I come back, where does the rubber meet the road from my transformation to the realization to the actualization? Because what happens is people go on a trip, like to a retreat, they come back, they slide back into the old ways because it's the path of least resistance. And so it fades. And so for us in time, the problem is you can't unknow what you know. So you go have the big realizations, you don't actualize it, but now you know
brutal,
about it.
brutal.
Right. And
Yeah,
that's when we start to see
that's
it
so
degrade the
good.
health.
That's so
Like
good.
the body now won't let you ignore it.
This is really good, and thank you for how you broke that down too. And hopefully, I can remember to get back to the Sherpas because those fuckers are wild. That's wild. But to this point, and I don't know why it's been my experience. I mean, maybe because I was in recovery so long and just working on myself so much. But anytime I've had a breakthrough in a psychedelic experience and I've gotten the answer, or more so, even like a to do list, kind of that's how it comes to me. It's
Mhm.
like, okay, you're seeing some shit now. If I have the courage to lean into something, especially those things I don't want to lean into, sometimes I take a break and I'm like, okay, we're gonna go there, and then it's like diving into a deep pool, and I'm just like, oh, we're fucking in here. I might not, my ego might not like what we find and what I'm gonna be instructed to do afterward, because
Yeah.
that's where the real
That's
courage
radical
is required.
self-responsibility.
Yeah, but I'm thinking back to the last time I sat with ayahuasca, and I didn't have post integration help.
Mhm.
If I would have needed, then someone like you or the people you're training would have been, but I didn't really need it. I know what the answers were that I got, and there would be such a tremendous sense of failure and guilt in me if I got those answers that were given to me by source, my higher self, soul, the medicine, whatever. Because usually for me, it's like, you're doing this, this, and this, go do it. And if I don't do it, it nags me. There's things that I need to do.
Yeah.
In the last ceremony, oh man, there were like very clear instructions. And one of them was to have a conversation with Allison about something that was very shamey. And I didn't want to do it. And after the first night, we woke up and I was like, I gotta do the thing. And we did it, and it was received with such love and acceptance. It was perfect. We worked through it. Another one, and I'll just share this for people listening. It's personal, but I don't care because there's probably someone listening that could use something like this.
Mhm.
But I was observing how it's so difficult for me to be in total silence and how much I distract myself listening to podcasts, playing music, just being here in the house. It's just big and empty and echoey. I'm like, why do I always have to be doing something, hearing something? Because Allison's not like that. She'll just chill. The house is quiet all day long. And I saw that even all the healing I've done around my trauma, that my whole life I've been running from this feeling, or, or just running from a sense of not being safe. Anyway, long story short, I got to the core of it, and it was around sexual abuse that I endured as a kid. And so, that's nothing new to me in those spaces to work with. I mean, I've gone like down to the darkest depths of that shit, felt it, forgiven it, all the things. But it was still lingering there and affecting, just how I operate to a degree, and not in dysfunctional ways, but just in that distraction. So anyway, the directions I was given were that I was to take two small pieces of paper and to, man, I thought this was like going to be unemotional, but to write the names of each of the two pedophiles that had groomed and abused me when I was a kid, to write them down on little pieces of paper. And then I had this box on our kitchen counter, like a little wooden, cute little wooden box, and it said to put them in there and to go bury it in the woods. I was like, wow, that's weird. And then the resistance was, which is hilarious. I liked that little box, and I was like, that's my box. I don't even use it, but I'm like, it's kind of cool. I don't want to waste it. I mean, that's how like
Yeah.
the subconscious is going, no, no, don't look at that, don't do it, hang on to that. And I came home, and I would have kicked myself in the ass so hard immediately, did the thing. When I drove them down the road with the shovel and I buried that fucking box. Did that mean anything? I don't know. I hope so. Was I given that instruction for a reason? I hope so, probably. Did my life dramatically change after that? No. Do I like silence more? Maybe a little.
Just
But it's
that box size.
but I was, and I can get a new box, maybe I already did. But it's that I was shown something very specific to do. I don't know why. I don't know from where it came, but I had to do that. But if I didn't have the wherewithal to do that, or it was
Right.
too scary, or I lazy, procrastinating, avoidant, whatever, then I would need a coach after that experience, and they'd say, "Well, how did it go? What happened?" And I would say, "Well, I got this box thing and these pieces of paper, but what do you think?" To have someone to hold me accountable to that if I couldn't do it myself would be really important, you know?
Oh, go ahead, baby.
Go ahead.
That's what you were saying. I think that spurned that long rant, and I apologize to the listeners for talking too much, but it's because I get that feedback sometimes. It speaks to the actualization, right? It's like that's the end step of that little thread that one went down. And there were a bunch of other things actually that weekend that I also completed, which was great. But that one was a good example for me because it was so concrete.
Mhm.
Well, thank
It was
you.
actionable.
Thank you for sharing that, for being so vulnerable and for having your emotions, family. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you for being you. Thank you for everything that you've endured, Luke. I really, really hold you in a tremendous amount of esteem for how you show up for your audience and for yourself and for Allison. Thank you, family. I really, really appreciate you. And I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that. Thank you.
Mhm.
I love you, ma'am.
And don't worry, everyone cries with us.
Yeah. Thank
Wouldn't
you.
be the first time.
Thank you.
Just sometimes we're doing these podcasts and I'm like, did you just say that?
Th-
It's like that, right? That judgmental self.
th-
But I
th-
know there's one person listening.
that needs to hear that,
Yeah,
man.
that's gonna
Well,
go, you can do that.
right, but
You can
that's the
you can
subtlety
talk
though.
about it,
Well,
you
but
know?
it's also that act that you said you don't know if it really made a difference. That subtlety is what we see creates the most transformation because that means you trust yourself.
So,
And that's like the core thing. That's the only hope I have for each person on this planet is to have that level of trust to be like, well, I don't know why, but when I listen to myself and I look at the results of doing that, it's gotten me here. I trust it. And so, even though in that moment you said, I don't know if it really impacted that, people can get so caught up in psychedelics being the big transformation that they will actually skip the nuance that is the difference of switching into an optimized life out of survival mode. And as someone that collects data, and like biohacking and metrics, for us, it is the nuance that you find the most truth. When there's not pain if you don't do it, like there would be discomfort, but in contrast to other things you've been through, that small act is as important as any big transformational experience. And for us, it's more that people have diminished the importance of those subtle nuanced moments that actually, for me, are the divine articulation of all of the other work. That in that moment you heard that voice that you said, all right, this is what I need to do, was the proof that you are taking the divine teachings into and integrating them into the now. That in that message, in that moment, you got to explore that's integrating it. So it's like I still integrate journeys from years ago where something will come in. And so for us, that actually perfectly exhibits from like a coaching perspective that sometimes people will go, well, it wasn't really, it was just a small thing. And I don't know if it really did anything. For us, we're like, no, that is the difference.
It's It is. It's a huge difference, and this is where we invite people to detach themselves from outcome. Your intention is not an outcome; it's something you're looking to explore. And for you to have that situation where it's like, I don't know why I'm doing this; it doesn't make sense. But you went and you did this situation, and now it's here, and you're broadcasting this to how many people, and how many people are going to hear this. And even if it's that one person that hears this story and saw you have this emotional situation or heard this come up for you, change their trajectory. That is you integrating with your audience. That's integration. And so to have the realization that things are outside of what we would know. These are plants. These are plants and fungi and substances that come from the universe, right? And so to sit here and think that you have jurisdiction over how things should be puts you in a position that you're expecting outcome. Anytime there's a should, you're anticipating an outcome. And so it's like, this doesn't make sense. Good. Do it anyway. Right. And so you did it anyway. And so now this is impacting something else and somebody else in a whole audience of people.
And that, it's like when you look at a flight path crossing the country, 1 degree, the nuance is a completely different city. That's if we leave Los Angeles and we're off 1 degree, if we thought we were going to New York, we could end up in Atlanta from 1 degree. And so that, for me, is where the coaching models really come into play because quite often, especially as someone that comes from the once an addict background as well, if I would have understood the little things I was doing to improve my life, it would have helped slow down and even stop a lot of the shame spirals because I didn't have proof because I was looking for enough quantifiable proof and I couldn't find it. And the second I felt like I didn't have it, I'd spiral back down. But those little nuanced moments, like the Condor Approach is a journaling system and it's actually totally free. And you'll have the link in the show notes, all
Yeah,
of that
speaking of which,
stuff.
I forgot to mention it earlier, but it's going to be lukestory.com/integrate.
Perfect.
Lukestory.com/integrate. So anything we talk about here, including links to your course
Yeah.
and all
Well,
the things are going to be in there.
well, we offer so much for free. And so this journaling workbook, w- it's what I developed to get out of my chronic medical conditions because the first 60% of my medical conditions was inflammation from diet, lifestyle, nutrition, which we could argue is still from trauma. And then the other 40% I got through psychedelics and tracking nuance because that little ache in my back that I thought, oh, it's because I'm getting older. No, it's because it was the way I was carrying shame. My endometriosis was an internalization of shame from assaults on my sexuality from 8 to 12 and my thoughts around the experience from being raised Mormon. And so when I started to look that the nuance is actually just as important because our body is comprised of all these cues and what we teach in the Condor coaching certification is body mapping, that there is no such thing as nuance. All of them are signals and cues. Your emotions point back to 3 points of ease. Every emotion is telling you if you're feeling safe, connected, and fulfilled. And if you'll ask yourself in any emotion, where am I not feeling safe, connected, or fulfilled? You'll usually figure it out. And if you talk to Tah, he will figure it out. And so we found all of these ways to take these very nebulous components and turn them into systems because that is our purpose. That is the gift of his medical background, my analytical mind, working in a lot of strategy, is that now we actually can lay it out. So someone before might have said, once an addict, always an addict, can see the data proof in front of them that even if they say my life sucks, if we get them from a 9 to a 7, that's huge.
Hmm.
And most people's minds are generalizing. So it either sucks or it doesn't suck. I'm in pain or I'm not in pain. I'm depressed. Everything is or, that binary. When you get the data in front of them and they can see, like, oh man, I've actually made some progress. That spark of hope is the difference. That little moment when they go, wow, no, because we have daily stress scores and sovereignty scores. Stress score is how someone's daily stressors are. Sovereignty is basically, can you be with your emotions? And what is that? What are you making that mean? Between those two scores, for someone to see their scores get higher, even by 1 point, is going, okay, I'm still on the right track, right? That's why when someone's on a weight loss journey, you measure, take pictures, weight, and fat loss percentage because you need more metrics because the scale alone isn't the truth of the whole story, right? The body fat percentage isn't all of it because their clothes might fit smaller because of their muscular changes. But in psychedelic space, until the Condor Approach, there were no metrics without trying to define experiences. That's not what we're doing. We're saying when you wake up every single morning, are you getting sleep more than yesterday, less, about the same? What do you want to know, do, be, or understand today? And then also celebrating yourself, and it infuses a gratitude practice, right? And then there's a body mapping, marking little X's on the body because you'll be like, man, every Sunday before I have to go to work, I'm getting my old shoulder injury. Is it your old shoulder injury? Or are there patterns that are showing up around the same people, the same dynamics, the same circumstances? And when we started to do that and look at the literal function of the body part being impacted, along with what we call the chakra development, what ages your chakras develop, your body starts to make perfect sense. And then you get a deeper appreciation for when you're getting the cues because now it becomes your best friend, the one that its only goal initially is to keep you alive. Once you mend that relationship, it will optimize and drive you to any outcome you want. Now, Ta and I will be walking down the street and I'll be like, I want to go that way. He doesn't ask why. And then we'll run into one person and in that moment was like, wow, I was just thinking about you. Because now our body is fueled for optimization and purpose and contribution. And so that's where it guides us instead of only away from pain. That is the expansiveness that's possible after the healing journey. And that's where we wanted to dedicate ourselves. There's a lot of beautiful facilitators out there. What we need is more skilled integration coaches to motivate people, put the rubber to the road after from a place of acceptance, radical self responsibility, teaching people how to communicate, how to build their emotional intelligence and expand the real estate of what they can hold. So it's not or. I'm not depressed or happy. I can be in a very depressed state because I lost something very important while still be in utter joy for the beautiful things I still have.
Mm.
It's that we keep being forced to choose, and we're here to show people how to expand their experience to hold everything.
Mm.
Brad,
Mm.
he loves you.
Oh my God,
He
so much.
does. I have
Oh,
love notes all
I
over
do
the
too.
house.
I do
oh
too.
my
I love
gosh.
being in your field, you guys.
Oh,
It's beautiful. It's so
girl,
good.
you're so amazing. Like I just all this time and it just keeps escalating. You're just so amazing.
I love you.
Oh.
Team Schmoopy for the win still. When we got together, everyone was like, just wait till the newness wears off. We're like, 10
I've
years later, sucker.
I've heard that too, and it just gets better and better.
But that is the life we live in, Luke. If we just go ahead and accept, like, some stuff sucks and some stuff is awesome, but everyone's trying to cut the highs and the lows. That's what all these antidepressants are for.
Yeah.
And when we can actually allow the suck fully without, like, living in it, but most people, the work where their opportunity is not to go deeper into their shadow trauma work, actually. It's allowing the beauty and gifts in their life to actually receive those things. Like when I first got into this, my shadow work was laughter and play and having fun. I had beaten myself to death on suffering for transformation. And the biggest turnaround for that was in an ayahuasca ceremony. She said, if you keep digging in the dirt, you'll find it. If you want to create, you have to look to the stars. And it was realizing it was time for me to get over my own self and my traumas and dramas and recognize, like, hey, it's time now. Put your boots on. There's a lot of people out there a lot worse off than you that need your help. And that's our call. Is anyone hearing the call right now is concerned about legality, is concerned about impact? Because the reality is, just because you set up a church does not give you legal protection. It gives you a defensible case. And if we only medicalize, then we create more criminals, because medicalization and legalization creates regulation. Regulation creates criminals who don't have access to the models that already exist that aren't going to serve the people they need to serve.
Which is a repetition of the old
It's
system.
the same thing. And the people that are going to take the hit are going to be the therapists. Like, if you look at any ad for a company offering jobs in the psychedelic space, we'll say in ketamine therapy for now, because that's what's legal, they are selling that you'll get to transform more lives, but they're paying poverty. And so we're going to create patients out of the heart-centered people that want to make the biggest difference and feed on their desire to help, which is why we said, you know what, we're going to step out of the role of facilitator to be completely legally sound, because we don't want to see therapists, doctors, and coaches become patients because their purpose becomes a sacrificial thing, that it's them or the people that they love. And we're here with a model to say you can help anyone at any price point. You get to decide it. You can be resilient with it. You can meet people where they are. You don't have to just double your rates. Just people haven't seen it done the way that we do. And that's what we want to share.
You guys have a course coming up here, which will open shortly after. We haven't
After the
figured out the dates of
podcast,
when,
yeah.
but by the time this podcast gets released, you'll have enrollment for your course. And you guys are doing what, like a 5-day coming up in January?
In February.
February, okay.
Yeah,
February
and-
7th to the 11th,
Okay.
2023.
In Austin.
In Austin.
Yeah. And is this what my friend David
Yes.
did earlier, right? In
Yeah.
September? Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
No,
yeah,
he did June.
He did
Oh,
June.
June. Okay. Yeah. He was texting me, oh man, this is amazing. He was thrilled. He was pumped. Still is.
Yeah, you know,
It made a huge impact on him because he's, like some people listening probably like seeing the value that he has to offer and just not having a framework for it.
It's a structure. And when people have a structure and we come with a skeleton and we help people with their unique gifts, they might be a doctor, right? They might be a chiropractor. They might have other tools they can integrate into an offer. But we explain, what does that have to do with a psychedelic lens of understanding the neurological and physiological impact of someone doing that work? That includes cannabis work, and that's legal in lots of places now. And so the models that we teach have to do with transformational experiences. Going to Tony Robbins is a transformational experience. If people knew how to integrate it after, it would change the outcome. Short-term results is nice. Long-term results is optimization. You can enhance something without optimizing it. You can go enhance your state of joy, but you're not going to optimize joy until you create the strategies that support the joy so that it's not based on willpower alone.
Optimization is enhancement on autopilot.
Mhm.
You're constantly optimized. You're constantly enhanced all the time. And so it becomes your new mainstay. And that's what we're looking to get people into that space. And the integration process that we have is here, and it's functional for all transformational circumstances. David Keller, shout out to David Keller, right?
He's going to be hearing this too, for sure.
He works with cacao. Right?
Beautiful ceremonies.
Beautiful ceremonies with cacao, and to have an integrative process for people in cacao. Boom. The person that can that you're working with, the owner of that company, I spoke to him about he wants to utilize this to help people integrate kava.
Oh, cool.
Okay.
Shout out to Cameron.
Cameron
True
from
Kava.
True
There you
Kava.
go.
What up, Cameron? He's an amazing human being, and
Yes.
his story is amazing. So if you get an opportunity
He's been
to
on the
check
show a
him
couple
out.
times.
Nice.
So he's looking at helping people to integrate their experiences around kava, because people have these expansive experiences and they're like, what do I do with this? And so this is something, we're in a really right place with psychedelics coming into a new space. It's on the stock market now. People are leaning into it. People are microdosing, and the legalization thing is here whether people like it or not.
Mhm.
And so we have about 330 million people in the United States of America. And we have roughly between functional, about 120 to 200,000 therapists in this country. The amount of people that are leaning into using psychedelics we're going to need a lot more therapists
Mhm.
than we have.
Yeah.
Okay. And
Wow.
we're going to need a lot more therapists. And so to train a therapist takes somewhere between 3 and 5 years, depending on how they study, right? From a social worker to a psychotherapist. And so it's going
Plus
to,
wait times
plus
for
wait
psychedelic
times for
programs.
and plus you don't know who's going to do what. And so to have coaches who can guide people back into themselves is tremendously important. And to have an integration model that's not just for psychedelics, it's for coaching, it's for cacao, it's for therapeutic circumstances of any sort. To have a model like this that we can get into the industries worldwide to help people find themselves in themselves is tremendously important.
And they can support their own communities
We're
versus the top-down support that's the trap.
Yeah, and we're using the lens of psychedelic integration right now. And this is an integrative process that we have people that are Reiki therapists, we have
Body
psychotherapists,
workers.
body workers that come to our training, and they take this and they use an intake process with their people so that they actually start to get to know their clients. So when stuff comes up, how many times have you gone for body work and you start crying, right? So, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, what do I do with this? This trauma comes up. How do you integrate that? To have a model where you're not just a massage therapist, but you also have a coaching situation where you can do a group with all of your clients twice a week, where you help them integrate how their body stuff comes into play.
The
Yeah, go.
what's unique in what we're doing is we're teaching people how to coach, and we're helping them build their business that supports what they want to do and in what their integrity looks like.
Hmm.
So one person, for example, she does basically like virtual work, right? Where someone might live on the other side of the world that can't get access to a facilitator. She doesn't facilitate them, but she helps educate them and like do a walkthrough with a camera to set the space and things to be mindful of and sharp corners and move that out of the way. And then she educates a trip sitter in the space for them,
Wow.
right? Because that's all that's
Put a playlist
available.
together.
Yep.
Playlist is important.
Always the playlists. But those kinds of things,
Yeah.
we give the power back to each individual because as long as we rely on daddy government or whoever to come in and save us, we're in trouble, right? Because with how quickly this is getting mainstream and all the documentaries, and my mom called me about the Today Show. She's like, "Did you see the Today Show today?" I said, "I assure you I did not." And wonderful, right? It's becoming so mainstream that it's growing much faster than any system could possibly support. And the thing for us is we're like, right, and we can get you to be a master psychedelic informed coach in 2 years so that once it legalizes where you are, it's turnkey. Facilitating is the easiest part when you understand how to hold space and be a solid coach. Because in that we have something we call a states assessment, and you run an SOS when someone starts to get activated. First step of an SOS, which is state or strategy, you stop. We call it you stop and take a pee pee.
See?
Pause and physical scan. Take a breath with someone, right? Just like these types of little tools. And then we'll say, all right, talk when you're coaching someone, what state are they in? S being the situation, T being their thought about the situation, A, the actions as a result of the thought about the situation. Then we have another T, which we call the triangle, which is the victim, villain, victor. The other E is the emotion. When you get the evidence of one circumstance, then you can see what strategies they're using, or they can see. It's not about you, right? You're just filling in the model over here so that they can see it on paper. From there, we can assess their strategies. This is where someone can take radical responsibility for what they want to do with it. I don't need you to change it. And so, our combination of teaching someone how to be a coach that isn't projecting their stuff all over on someone, how to hold very like clear space, and then how to take their unique gifts, not what some, certification is telling you have to do as a psychedelic psychotherapist. Because there's so much to unpack, but just as one example of how complex this is going to be and why the concern is for like therapists is in places like Oregon where it's legalized, they have to have multiple locations for the one business, the place where the journey happens, the place of the integration coaching. So you're going to have multiple expenses for one offer. When this is first rolling out, it's going to be for PTSD, depression, anxiety, which means you have to be sick enough to qualify for care. And then we already know that people with those severe complexes aren't usually working. So then they're going to need government assistance or the VA. And so who has to do that? The licensed therapists are the ones that have to chase the insurance companies. We're going to have coding issues with insurance. They're already not going to be making enough money. So again, we're going to force one sect of people who want to be the helpers to be the oppressed because of the system. And so in this, we're saying we're going to help you create a model that's functional for you. If you love one to one, cool. If you want to run monthly integration circles with your community and charge $20 a person, great, let's create that for you. But in a way where the results are quantifiable, in a way that actually supports sovereignty and for a community to build and still be in their own processes, but together
All the
Wow.
while, you creating a sustainable income so
for
that you are not
yourself.
struggling yourself and putting yourself into a traumatic circumstance.
Yeah, that's a bona fide archetype, right? The broke healer, the
Mhm.
broke spiritual teacher.
Broke musician, I did that one too.
I did
Yeah,
too. Yeah,
me too.
girl.
Hey, me too, bruh. Traveled around the world with it.
Yeah,
Mhm.
but I think an important thing here that I'm getting is the foundation of a grassroots approach to this because I mean, as you're talking, Cole, I'm just like, oh man, this shit is way more complex. I'm just like, yeah, make it all legal, Cole. Everyone's gonna get healed. It's like, oh, this is nuanced. But something that comes to mind is with this grassroots approach, kind of from the bottom up, coaches up, being self-empowered, as Toss said, being able to support themselves, create an ethical business, a win-win business out of this, is the accessibility.
Mhm.
Because that's the thing I think about. Oh, sure, I can fly to Costa Rica and spend 5 grand on an ayahuasca retreat. Well, what about the person who makes 25 grand a year? And that's not feasible, right? And so if they're like, oh God, I'm really feeling a call to work with medicine, then they would run a higher risk of maybe not, maybe doing a little more clumsily or getting someone who's really not qualified to help them integrate or to hold space or actually serve the medicine or whatever
Well,
it
or
is,
it's too
right?
much pressure on one experience because they might have saved every cent or taking their kids' college
Right.
fund thinking this is the only chance I have. So maybe if I take this $1,000 and go to, South America, then and I'll, go to the bootleg shaman I found in Iquitos or something. It's a thing.
Oh
There's like,
god.
red light district vibes.
Oh
But that's a
man.
thing. And we're also seeing a lot more people that are coming forward in claiming their indigenous heritage without the training because they see the financial gain. So there's lots of things happening on so many levels that's why for us educating, once we illuminate those, then people go, oh, okay, we have more conversations to have. But this is where the changes start because just by me being able to say to someone, look, I know you want to go to Peru. This is the only $1,000 that you have. And that's a lot of pressure to put on yourself and the facilitator that basically, if you don't get this transformation, you're offing yourself. And that doesn't mean someone still doesn't go. But by us being able to have a more real conversation from a coaching perspective, then someone may choose to do it differently, right? Or we may say how we can do more work to prepare in breath work, in embodiment practices to hopefully impact the outcome of their experience. But people are getting more desperate, and it's still going to be years before I would say legal access for all. And so the first step from my lens is decriminalization so people can grow their own, share their own in that way and hold space in their own community because not everyone can fly to work with elders. Not everyone has access to elders. And yet, they're hurting in, the streets of Philly. They're hurting in the streets of LA. And if there's one person there that has had exposure to be able to hold space for them that actually knows their lived experience, that's life changing.
That brings to mind probably the $1,000,000 question of this conversation for people who are more on the participant side of things or the curious participants. And it's a question I get often, especially like in direct messages on Instagram. Like, I know I probably shouldn't ask you this here, but like where I live in my community, these experiences do not exist. Like, how do I find someone to help me? In that. And so I'll direct them to like the third Paul Austin's Third Wave website. There's a directory of, retreat centers out of the country. And legal ways to
Mhm.
have these experiences, and I'm kind of stuck there. I'm like, ah, try that website. I
Yep.
don't know. I'm not gonna, introduce someone into something that could be illegal, essentially.
Totally.
Especially on a social media platform. So for
They're all
someone,
screenshot. It was Luke's
yeah,
fault.
yeah, no. Or people try to send me mushrooms all the time. I'm like, dog, like, they're illegal. I know we kind of all forget that, but I remember more being in a state like Texas than I did California. But say someone's listening and they're like, cool, I would like to have one of these integration coaches or, a psychedelic informed therapist or whatever it is. But I actually just want to go have this experience,
Mhm.
and it's not in my social circle. I don't hang around with burners and whatever, it's just outside of their repertoire. Because it doesn't, a lot of these experiences can be had in an inexpensive way. It's not the access is necessarily
Totally.
financial. I mean, you can grow mushrooms in your closet enough to send you to the fucking moon. That's not it. And you can find someone at any concert to probably sell them to you or whatever.
You know what? And this is part of it, Luke, is that people have to first start opening dialogue in their community because it's different now than it was 2 years ago, And so my invitation where anyone is actually to start talking about it and just asking questions and start to get the pulse of your community because there's facilitators everywhere. Like every time someone thinks there's not someone in their city, it's because that person doesn't feel safe to talk about it. And so it takes building rapport. It takes maybe sharing some stories about new research on your page, right? You'll start to find it. But if you don't come out of the foxhole, they're not coming out of the foxhole because they're
Right.
the ones that have the
Right.
bigger legal concern. And so it's being mindful in how you seek out support. Don't send people messages on Instagram that's like, where do I get mushrooms? Like you're immediately a red flag that you don't know what you're doing, which makes you a liability. And so, look at your local psychedelic society chapter. There's those all over the country. Maybe reach out to them about starting one. Hey, could we get some speakers here? When you start to gather community, you'll find what you need. But be mindful again in that outcome driven approach that I have to do that because that's when people tend to settle for an environment that's not very safe for them.
There's something I call the expansion equation, and it's curiosity plus courage equals expansion. And to be curious about psychedelics is fine. It's wonderful. I'm curious about this. But if you don't have the courage to go talk about it, you may not expand. And so to have the courage to go out and actually ask about this stuff, ask the people. Most of the people that I know are scared to talk to other people because they're afraid they're going to be stigmatized, and the person that they'll be talking about is thinking the same thing. And so it's, do you have the courage to open the conversation? Hey, I hear about psychedelics and I'm scared that, that it's a drug thing. I'm going to be addicted. Can we have a conversation about it? And this is where it starts. It starts with having a curious conversation with courage and moving beyond the stigmas of, like I was saying earlier, the stigmas in the indoctrination space that causes people to be afraid. It's not illegal to discuss things. I wouldn't.
Depending on what you discuss.
Well, I mean, if you're
You should see
asking,
my shadow banning on Instagram
well,
when
I mean,
when I discuss the lines in the sky.
right?
They
No, but
don't.
I'm talking about person to person.
No, I know what you're
It's not.
saying.
It's not illegal to discuss person to person. Talk to your friends about this stuff.
Ask them if
Talk.
they saw the new documentaries.
Yeah, I just
Yeah,
ask them,
yeah.
ask these things, and start having conversations about it. Things will come to the surface.
Mhm.
All right, excellent. That's good information. I'm gonna make sure I don't forget anything here because there's a lot. Well, on that note, if someone starts to have these conversations and comes out of the psychedelic curious closet, what are some and so they find an ad hoc facilitator or shaman or whatever it is. What are some from the participant perspective, what are some red flags if they're kind of interviewing someone or learning more about someone that's serving medicine? What do they want to look out for to maybe avoid a situation that's harmful, deleterious in any way?
The first thing is the body. If your body says no, the answer is no. Check in. Be able to see if your body's like no. If your body's like run, run. That's the number one thing I would invite a person to. Number two is, asking questions. How will you keep me safe? Right? What is your policy on safety? You know, will there be anybody else around?
How many
How many
people?
people will
Yeah,
be
that's
there?
always my question.
Where will this
How many people and who's on the playlist?
where will this take place?
Mhm.
All of these things.
Yeah.
What kind of substance will you be working with? What is your experience with this stuff? There's a
Will
whole
everyone be taking the same thing? Is there going to be more than one thing?
Mhm,
really
mhm.
important
That's
space
good.
because different substances have different energetic spaces. And if a person is not equipped to help people navigate those spaces, things can get chaotic really quick. And that can support a person to feel outside of safety.
That's when we start to see what we would describe as a messy container. When there's a lot of substances in one container, it's like opening interdimensional doors on this planet and planetary, universal other dimensional doors. And we see quite often people get very dysregulated and have weird symptoms in their body when they were in a container with a lot of different substances on different timelines or like different timings, where it's
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
there's so many energetic frequencies happening and they don't all get closed. And so my biggest things is, one, is the facilitator going to be taking two? And is there anyone that is not taking anything? Because I want someone there that's completely sober, because that's what makes me feel safe, right? The other thing that's really important for me is the numbers, right? If there's a lot of people there, I'm not interested, because I spend more time like trying to not feel other people's stuff or not take it on. And I've just learned, like, what if I just don't do that anymore instead of working so hard? The other thing that is really important for me is, what's the support look like after?
Right.
I want to know, are we doing a closing circle? If I need anything, can I call you? Because some people will say, well, we'll do a closing circle. That's it. Doesn't mean I won't work with them. In the jungle, they don't do integration after, right? That's not a thing for their tradition, at least with like the Huni Kuin. But I wanna know that so that I can then inform with maybe someone else I'm going, like, can we keep an eye on each other this week and check in? Things like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah,
So
that's
it's
good.
it's how you feel about the answers. It's not about that there's right or wrong answers.
Mhm.
It's that, ask the questions you would wanna know. What do I need to bring? What's the sleeping arrangements? What do you recommend? What can I anticipate?
Sleeping arrangement's
It
huge.
is.
Mhm.
That's
It
Al-
huge.
is.
Also, what's
I
your
mean, not that you're typically going to sleep, but, when that
If you
time
want
comes,
space, it's
yeah.
important.
what's your policy on touch? Really, really important. What's your policy on touch? When a person is altered and they're touched, they can bring stuff up.
Mhm.
If there are multiple people, is there a code of conduct? Do you have everybody read a code of conduct and sign it? This includes radical consent. Do you need consent to look at another person eye to eye? This stuff can bring things up in people. And so, what is your code of conduct? Will there be touch situations? Are people allowed to have sex in your container? And this is something that is really, really important.
Oh, man, when it
Sex,
happens, it makes the whole
it can
container
the
go
whole container
crazy.
gets wonky, and people will go into back rooms and do stuff in certain people's containers. We've
I'll
had,
feel it. I'll feel
and
like all of a
and you
sudden the
can,
matrix shift.
yeah. So sex in and of itself is beautiful. It's wonderful. It is an altered state. Okay, when people get into sexual spaces, the amount of hormones that are moving through people's bodies creates a
Mhm.
different energetic pattern, and that interacts with psychedelics in a different way. And so, what's your policy on that? These are questions to ask your facilitator, and be bold about asking your facilitator. If your facilitator gets sketchy and is afraid to ask or won't answer these questions, don't worry about it. It's my container. That for me is a red flag.
Yeah, it's more how they handle the questions you ask. Because if I have someone that's not willing to answer my questions when we have a neutral energy, then if I really need you, what's going to happen? Or if you've got allergies, is there a cat there? Is there a dog there? Like, those are not fun things when you show up to find out. So make a list of what would an ideal environment for you look like. You don't have to do it, right? It's like going to look for a house. You can say, well, I want the master tub and then this and the pool, but I can let go of some of these things too. But the clearer you are in what you could imagine would be a safe space for you to lie down, to have space alone, do you have to stay in the room, can help you bring tools and things to keep yourself comfortable.
Also,
Awesome.
one other thing I would ask is what is the level of experience of the people that are going to be in this event?
Oh, yeah,
If you
yeah.
go to an event where everybody's a newbie, you're going to have different types of energy than a kind of mixed environment or an environment where people are experienced. So that's a very important question to ask. I find that people who are new to psychedelic work have safer experiences when they go to something that has people who have been experienced in this space,
Everyone kind of knows how to hold their own energy with more
especially
experience.
if there's more than 8 people.
Yeah. Very good, very
Mhm.
good. That's all really good stuff. I hope people were listening. If you follow, half of what you both just offered, you probably have a positive outcome for the right person at the right time.
And we can also include that finding your facilitator.
Yeah, I'll put a whole little bundle for your page because we
Okay.
actually have a document called Finding Your
Oh,
Facilitator.
cool.
Like we have lots of free stuff because this is a part of what we've created, right? Our trips and retreats are not cost efficient for most people until they see that what we create, how many families are impacted, where that money goes, and that allows us to do a lot of free stuff.
Yeah. I mean,
Because
just the workbook, the Condor Approach workbook. I mean, when you print it out, you guys, yeah, you
345
printed me one.
pages or
It's a
And
freaking
something.
Bible,
and
Yeah.
it's
So,
translated into 4 other languages. It's translated into Portuguese, Spanish, French, and German
oh,
now.
word?
Mhm.
Yeah, it
Cool.
has to be
Congratulations.
formatted still. So that's our
Yeah.
next step. But
Yeah.
our goal is that these tools, if everyone at least had this in the community where they were, they could create a safe space to explore themselves or to hold space for someone else. And, because like I said, sometimes the best person for the job is the person that's there because there is no one else is coming.
Well, that's an important thing that you mentioned earlier, and I don't want people to mistake this as just a broad license for anyone who has one journey as like, I'm going to facilitate now. But there really is someone for everyone too, and I think you talked about this earlier, and it made me think of my early days in addiction recovery. I mean, I felt like I had zero to offer anyone at all. But let's say I made it through rehab that first 28 days. If I'm on day 27 and this dude's on day 2, I'm like fucking,
Your
the
master
Dalai Lama
sensei.
to this guy. I'm basically an enlightened master because I've made it, those many days marked off my calendar
Yeah.
without putting something in my body. So I do believe in that, but still, like without the framework and the coaching kind of element that you guys are
That's
talking about, that's the missing link.
Well, and that's the radical self-honesty, and that's why for us, we said our greatest gift we could give is for people to get clear in what they know and what they don't. Because when you see it clearly in front of you, because I've had times that there were people I said because of certain conditions I wouldn't work with, then they came to me in just a certain way that I was like, they trust themselves. And like I had an ayahuasca circle with one of our, she's a Paige in Peru, Marley Tumé, that one of the gentlemen that was gonna participate in our circle with her, um, they initially said no because the medications on that he's on, and he and I spoke about it, and he said, "I trust where I am. I know my body. I trust my guides." And it's medication he couldn't come off of for different reasons. And I felt totally confident in my body. I wasn't facilitating, right? But I'm educating and we're in discussion. And we sat with her and she felt into him and she said, okay. So there's also guidelines and there's rules. And so until you get clear in the differences between guidelines and rules, what things you don't know. So if you get into a vehicle you don't know how to drive, if you've never driven a stick, you might make it a little ways until you completely like blow out the clutch or something. And so it's like just by having some foundational things, we can at least get people clear in how they can serve now, when to refer out and when to recognize something is over your head
Right.
Yeah.
And that's like you're starting with cacao, right? I mean, there's a kind of an entry point
or
of
cannabis
doing
or
something
mhm,
in, I mean, tea ceremonies, right?
totally.
There are many different ways of different levels of altering your state in some subtle ways and some dramatic ways.
Breath work,
Breath
Yeah,
music.
work,
yeah,
shibari, there's all
Mhm.
yeah,
kinds of things, you
yeah.
know?
I'm thinking like tea ceremony to bufo. That's the spectrum.
Well, right? I mean, and it's once a teacher, twice a student, right? And it's like mastery is not it's an ongoing evolutionary process. It's not a static condition. And to be able to move into that space, you have to start somewhere. You have to start as an apprentice or an experiential person. And once you move into that space, you develop things. And I think that the Condor approach provides an amazing space for people to get into that space of practicing, becoming mastered in one particular region, and then expanding that into something else and to continue on the expansion.
And
And
to
that's for
prove
everything.
yeah, to prove their own processes because lots
Mhm.
of people have tools. But if you really sit down, do they know if their tools for will work for other people? Plug it into our process and find out.
Right. That brings to mind, as we're discussing access and this becoming more mainstream, you have people that are of the belief that this belongs to the indigenous peoples of the world, and any alteration of those rituals that have been tested over time and developed, over God knows how long, if you're deviating from that model, or not even the model, but if you're not going to sit with someone in Brazil or Peru that's 80 years old and has been doing this their whole life, that you're not doing it right, or you're not going to get what you need.
Mhm.
So I guess the question is, and maybe you've already answered it throughout this whole conversation now that I think about it, but it's like, how do we innovate and move forward with this and also honor the traditions and the people from whom these traditions emerged, right? It's kind of that cultural appropriation sort
Mhm.
of thing, right? Well, you're some white girl, like you can't serve ayahuasca, that kind of
Totally.
stuff. How do
Yeah,
we?
look, I mean, I've faced it, right, as a white woman. I You know what I did as I really sat and said, "What questions would I ask myself in this role?" And I started to explore all of them. And the thing that we've really come to find, and then it was validated by many of our teachers in South America, one of them said to us, he said, "Tradition's a beautiful thing that we must honor, but tradition is a prison." And as we started to explore that actual meaning over the last 5 or 6 years, one thing became abundantly clear the more immersed I came, not with the experience of ceremony, but the cultures the ceremonies come from. I started to realize that tradition according to who and at what time, starting in what year. Because
Right,
ayahuasca in
right.
itself, what people are adhering to as traditional now was not tradition before like 1976, right? And certain tradition happening down in the jungles in the Amazon right now, women are not allowed, the indigenous women are not being allowed to be servers of ayahuasca, but they used to be able to. But now that there became a patriarchal paradigm shift, right, within the last 100 years. So they're working to reclaim their own medicine as medicine women, which is why the work of Marley Toumé is so important. She is the only recognized woman Paget as being like that shaman facilitator. And so the first thing I ask people is I say, well, which part of the tradition and what year are you talking about? Which peoples, which tribe, according to who? Because the context of tradition evolves.
Yeah.
And we can't, if we all go to the jungle, we destroy the jungle. All the retreat centers being built there, many don't even have water filtration. The jungle is not designed for cities in places like Iquitos or creating cities in the jungle. So it's not functional for us to all do it that way. Where I think we have the opportunity is to have conversations on what we choose to do is financial contribution. Because for, say, in Brazil, some of those communities want to get out of the jungle because they want to actually go create a retreat center to welcome people, and they can't do it on a 2-day boat ride, right? In the ways that they want to now. They are evolving. One of the boys who came from the jungle here for the first time, he had pizza. He wants pizza now. Like, he can't get pizza in the jungle. At what point do we have the right to deny people's evolution too
Yeah.
of their
Yeah.
indigenous practices? So I think that the next conversation truly is understanding sustainability. Ayahuasca grows very slowly as far as the vine. So for me, it's talking more about psilocybin and wachuma, very fast growing. They can survive in a lot of environments, and looking at the cost. Again, if we remove all judgment and we bring in the elders to help understand, right? And then we are financially contributing. Like for us, we contributed more in the last year to indigenous communities than most corporations have. But that's because we built it into our model because that is how we help support our teachers. But the thing is, they don't want free give outs. And so they, like when COVID happened, when everyone else was worried about toilet paper, we reached out to the families down in Peru that are our soul family there and said, "What do you need?" They didn't want free money because they want to be valued. They sent us boxes of textiles that we sold. They gave me a price. I said, "Great, we'll double it because this is unique for people to get." And they got all of the money. So when we start to actually integrate what we believe, then each person takes responsibility. Who are your teachers? What group's important to you? How about you commit in your business model how you contribute, in what ways? And that starts from the ground up, not when you have enough, because no one ever seems to.
Yeah. I've noticed that when
I'm
it
gonna
comes.
contribute.
I've noticed that within myself. you
No,
know?
we give first. Like,
Yeah.
we've
Yeah.
given amounts that scared the shit out of us because we didn't even have enough ticket sales for the retreat yet. But for us, it was trusting that when we give because we know, we give because we trust. And so for us, the contribution is the good faith. It's the giving gratitude first, not the backwash of what's left.
Listen, when a lot of the traditions on our planet were created, were founded, there was a lot less people on this planet. And so the traditions were designed around smaller groups of people that had different methods of communication and did not have the internet and technology. And so now that we have all of this technology, we have different financial systems, we have a changing food supply, we have all of this different stuff. The traditions that were created to support societies in the way they were are not functional right now. And so to honor these things, I understand. And to have these things transmute into something new that can honor the technology that we have is tremendously important as we evolve. We are currently at almost 8 billion people on this planet. In the next 20 years, we're slated to have another 400 million human beings on this planet. That's more than another United States of America. Okay. And in 40 years from that, we're supposed to have another billion people on this planet. That's what we're slated for. And if we keep doing things based on old models, we're going to have a disrupted planet. And so we've got to change the way we do things traditionally, not just as far as agriculture is concerned, as far as morality, as far as the way we use our water and the way we treat one another is tremendously important right now. And so if we are consistently looking at traditions and how we've enslaved people of different ethnicities, we've enslaved women, we've done all of these things, child labor, all of these things. If we continue to do these things that are traditional, we're headed
Mhm.
down a slippery slope.
And that's, people will talk about deforestation in the jungle, but then I'm sitting down having conversations with women in the jungle that are saying every time we make money, the men from other tribes come and take it because they feel entitled to it. And so for them, they're like, yeah, we need help with the jungle, but can you please first make it where we're not getting cast out, where 70 women were recently cast out of a village in the jungle because they wanted to practice the ancestral traditions of the spiritual components. And the men in the village said no. So 70 women were cast out in the middle of the jungle alone with like 4 other men to basically rebuild a new society for themselves or a new tribe for themselves. So there's
Wow.
so many other things to talk about that,
Yeah.
it's like, well, we need to save the jungle. They're like, yeah, I hear you. That is important, but that's what gets commercialized too. When we have, could you help, like woman to woman, can we talk, right?
Right.
Like when the men are busy. And
Yeah.
so all of this to say that this is why we believe it doesn't mean we can't have the medicalized models. I actually believe that the chemical teachers is what we call them. So MDMA or psilocybin in chemical form. I think we need all of it because of the need. And there's going to be some people that will only feel safe sitting in a clinic with a doctor, or maybe they're on certain medications. They need to have that eye. What I refuse to see happen is that people don't know psilocybin comes from mushrooms that they could grow. That's what, just
Yeah.
like farming, some people still buy McDonald's, some people buy, grass-fed finished meat. For me, that's what I'm going to see in psychedelics. Some people are going to want the organic that they raised in their own garden, that they loved, that they prayed on, that they sang to. And other people are going to want a clinical setting. And from a sustainability perspective, we actually would benefit from some laboratory aspects so that it's not all put on the pressure of, say, the jungle or growing a vine. And
Or our
so,
beloved Sonoran toads, you
right,
know?
Right.
they're facing
That's right.
extinction as it is with the
Yeah.
trajectories right now.
Yeah.
And
That's one
so,
thing whenever I talk about that and, not telling people they should go do it, I'm just honestly sharing my experience, but I'm like, I don't know, maybe we should stop talking about it. But
well,
then you have
you have
yeah,
you
then you
have
have
chemical,
synthetic
synthetic.
5-MeO
And
DMT, yeah.
from my experience, only your belief that you can't get mutual benefit, because I've had people say, well, it doesn't have the soul. I've done chemical versions and had just as much access to organic matter because of who I am and how I connect to the earth in general. When we first moved downtown, someone said, I don't know how you could do that and disconnect from the earth and be in the sky. I said, is the sky not a part of the earth? Because nothing can take me from connection from the earth now that I've been so deeply connected. Closing my eyes, I can sit under any tree in the world. I can hold the same eucalyptus tree that I've hugged 1,000 times outside of Cusco. To me, once you really recognize that you can't actually be separated from anything, then you can look at the reality of all of the tools and gifts we have from evolution too. And then only when we have the real conversations can we talk about the real solutions, because some of the chemical teachers are going to be necessary for us to meet the need. Or if everyone goes to do DMT with the Sonoran Desert Toad, we've got a year. If everyone goes to do Cambo, we've got 3. Like the need is so much bigger.
It's tremendous. And
Yeah.
when you consider the amount of people that don't have finances, for pharmaceutical companies to be able to reproduce a psychedelic substance without having to destroy, the forest and all of this stuff that could actually serve people, this is going to be something that's going to be readily available to people who don't have the money to fly to Peru to do all of this other stuff.
Or
No, go
No, I
ahead.
was gonna say, or they're gonna clear the jungle to grow ayahuasca because the jungle's so dense, it can't get enough light. So how do you get the chacruna vine to grow faster? Or if the vine to grow faster, it needs more sunlight. Chacruna is the other plant, but the vine for it to grow faster needs more sun, which means you clear you clear the jungle. So there will always be an outcome of the decisions. But when we actually sit down with all of it and elders and talk about it, then we can come up with real solutions. Right now,
Mhm.
everyone's trying to choose the one they believe is right, wrong, binary, but they're not looking at all the evidence.
People are always building a case on what's right and what's wrong.
Mhm.
And this is where we get into the judgment space, and this is where people get offended, and they get into the triangle that we talk about, the drama triangle, the victim, the villain, and the hero, the rescuer, the victor. These are the spaces that we get into, and then we separate each other. And the idea of separation, again, goes back to what Cole was saying, is the idea that all of these substances don't come from this planet, don't come from the plants, don't come from the minerals. All of these things, no matter if they're made in a laboratory or if they're grown in a pot or if they're grown in a forest, whatever it is, this is all from the same planet. Can we get these things to integrate? And that's why we're here to talk about this, because integration is not optional. Whether we do it from a space of awareness or unawareness, can we be in a space where we bring ourselves into awareness and we do this because we choose to, not because we're forced to? And this is where the difference is, I believe, in this space. We believe this is why we're doing this work, is because we're interested in getting people into a space where they feel safe enough. If people don't feel safe, if they don't feel connected and they don't feel fulfilled, their nervous systems are going to be on fire. Those are the 3 places of disease: unsafe, unfulfilled, and disconnected. When we get safe, connected, and fulfilled, we are in ease. And that is the space where we can make decisions to integrate ourselves from a space that's highly functional.
Hot damn. Well, you guys, I think we did it.
19 hours later.
I can't drop this mic because it's on my head, but I will drop my notes, damn it. Man, I love you guys. Thank you so much for
Mhm.
spending time with me today. And thank you for what you guys are creating. I mean, we went to, I don't want to say a presentation because it was very informal, but when we came to your house the other day, I was like, we got to have a podcast about this. You guys, I mean, you were already on some cool shit, but this is,
It's
I feel like
something.
this is bigger than I can almost conceive of at the moment. Like your vision is massive.
It is.
But anyone
It
that
only took 10 grams of mushrooms if
I
you
mean,
ever want to
listen,
see it.
the movement is called integration is not
Yeah.
optional.
Yeah,
That's it.
yeah.
And we are honored to have you and anybody else who wants to join the movement. Let's
Mhm.
inform people about integration, not just about psychedelics, about life in general, about this
Yeah.
planet.
Yeah. And I love what you guys are doing with the coaching program. We're going to put all that stuff in the show notes, and I'm sure we'll probably be able to wrestle a discount for our listeners out of you.
For
Yes.
sure.
For those that want to attend here in Austin in February,
Yes,
we'll put
please.
all the info in there. Because it sounds very cool and very needed. And I do have one testimonial from someone that I know and trust who is like, it's awesome. So thank you for putting that together. I mean, when you guys kind of broke that down the other day, I was like, dude, this is a lot
Oh
of
no,
work.
we're
This is a lot of work. I
it
mean,
like
because you have it's a 5-day live. Because I ran a business for years where we did live events, and
yeah,
it's not for the faint at heart.
no.
So you have 5 days, and then there a
90 days
90
after.
days after
With
that,
weekly
right?
calls and
Okay.
coaching calls to integrate, because again, we're
So you got to
helping you.
integrate the 5 days. Okay.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
and because
Yeah.
we're
Mhm.
helping people come up with a plan for their business, so we want to actualize it.
Yeah.
Like part of our vision is 10,000 coaches that make $10,000 in their first round of the Condor Approach in a way that is integral and authentic to them so that they believe they can operate outside of the Western models that are created right now and actually be of service to their community and determine where the money goes. And I tell people all the time, you may not need more money, but your community does. And if you don't do something about it, then who? Because we can sit and wait for someone else all we want to. But if you're well enough to come, then it's you.
Awesome. I'm not going to ask you my standard question because you have a beautiful instrument in your hands. So, Cole, I assume you're going to give us a little closing
I'll do
offering
an
here.
outro.
Cool. Let's do it. So, for those watching the video,
This is
um,
called a Shruti box.
yeah, I love these things.
Me too. You know, music is something that in the space is so important. And again, I'm grateful to have teachers like Marin Azoff, Nature Paloma, anyone that loves incredible music. If you haven't checked out Olax Records on Instagram, she's from the Saka people of northern Siberia. She does all the animal noises, and I've been taking privates with her and just learning from lots of different tradition. This is another way for us to access altered states. And Tah and I met because of music, so it's a big part of everything we do.
Let her rip. I'm gonna mic your.
Ábrete corazón, ábrete sentimiento, ábrete entendimiento, he anulado la región. It's hidden in the earth, in the plants, in the fire, underwater. Open your heart, open your feeling, open up your understanding, leave your logic behind, and let your soul shine that's been hidden deep inside. Time is now, the time is now to open up your heart and remember how spirit can heal, how love In order to reach the Almighty, we must first learn to be a human.
And when you're a human living in metaphor and allegory, just remember to give thanks for this podcast and Luke's story, for the new things, the traditions, the old relics. Make sure you're integrating your life and integrating psychedelics, integrating your mind, your body, your spirit, your soul. staying away from needing to have control. Your intention of what you want to know, do, be, or understand is a place that you can integrate for every woman, boy, girl, and man. For every person on every continent, whether you're loaded with money or you can barely pay your rent, whether you have food on your table and water in your glass, it doesn't matter. Stay in the now, not the future or the past. So I implore, and you I do adore, and I'll do this over and over again until my mind and body is sore. Because this comes from the inside, from the ground and the heavens above. For all the people listening and watching, it is you that I love. Love, 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 it's never a scam, because love for me is synonymous with I am. I am you, and you are me. Together integrated equals we. So I thank you all for your listening, and I thank you all for the shine that you're glistening. Join the mission. It's not impossible. The mission for us, integration, is not optional.
In order to reach the Almighty, we must first learn to be a human.